Have you ever wondered if there's more to human potential than what meets the eye? We'll be covering the psychic race during the Cold War, remote viewing, Reiki, clairvoyance, Arhat abilities, and more. Asking the question, do we all have undiscovered superpowers? Hello, and welcome to this episode of Mysteries with a History, where you'll be taken on a wild ride into the unknown, the strange, and the mysterious. Like you, I have questions, and like you, I want answers. And with each episode together, we will peel away the layers to look for the truth. Let me bring in my co host, Jimmy Church of Faded Black Radio. Jimmy, happy Thursday,
That's
as it
it.
is every
That's it.
Thursday.
That's it. I'm done with you. I'm done. I am.
So you always say, but you keep coming back.
Oh, man. She does this on purpose. She's watching me. She wants the key moment. The key moment. I'm doing stuff. I'm doing personal things in here. What, Cristina? Thank you. What a great show this is going to be. Hello to everybody. Superhumans with superpowers, and I love the poll that you've got up, and we've got 94 votes in. Let me jump in. And the man, see, I already voted. Now I can't see the poll. What brought this on this week? This is like not out of our wheelhouse, but it kind of surprised me, and I'm excited about it. What brought on superhumans with superpowers?
Because number one, why not? Okay, that's just like my
Okay.
first question. Why not for this one? But here's the thing. When we are studying the topic of UFOs, we hear people having telepathic communication with interdimensionals or extra dimensionals. We hear about levitation. We hear about being healed by these entities sometimes or molested in other cases. But there does seem to be this connection between the two, and I thought it'd be really fantastic to go ahead and do a whole show really looking into this, but also at the exact same time. And I can talk from experience, like coming firsthand, doing this kind of research for today's show. I thought to myself, I could do this stuff. I haven't done it yet, but I could if I wanted to.
Wait,
And who doesn't wanna be a superhero?
you've got a superpower?
It
Do
gives
do
dad,
tell.
maybe.
Let's
That's about
start.
it.
Let's start right there. What's your superpower besides ramen?
I make
Oh,
pretty darn good ramen.
I've got my alien ramen shirt on.
Oh, that's a pretty sick shirt. I like
Yeah,
that
it's
shirt.
pretty sick. My fashion coordinator sent it to me. What's your superpower? Have you? That's what the poll is based on. And I was looking at the poll. Let's discuss the poll, and then I want to talk about your superpowers. I said yes. I've got superpowers. Where's the poll sitting right now?
So right now there's 114 votes, and if you're catching this live, that's the great thing about this is that we do polls. So right now, 57% say yes, 27% say no, 11% say undecided, and 5% say I've witnessed someone else do it. And the question is, have you ever experienced a time where you felt that you demonstrated a superpower ability?
Okay, so what's your superpower? Have you moved something?
No, but I do try on occasion just in case I inherently got it at one point. I do try that. I have
I
tried remote
tested.
viewing. I've tried astral projection. I've tried telepathy. I've tried talking to animals, and I failed in all of those. But you know what? I still try from time to time because you never know when it might come up. But as a superpower for myself, dude, I make really good
Levitating?
ramen.
Have you levitated?
Oh, trust me, I have tried for years on that one, and I have not achieved it. But even if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Do you you know David Blaine, right? He's a magician.
Yes.
And he levitates in front of people on the street. And it's crazy to watch people's reactions. Now, I don't know how he does it. And, to say obviously is a trick, obviously, I don't know. But to watch people that are standing around him and when he does it, it's pretty amazing. Now, Now, specifically talking about David Blaine is one thing, but there has been many claims about levitation over the years. We don't necessarily have to jump into that right away, but people have witnessed this. Now, is it a parlor trick? Is there something else going on? Now, when you're going 3 feet or 3 inches above the ground, okay, that could be something, an optical illusion. You're doing something 6 feet above the ground, or 10 feet or whatever. That's a whole nother thing altogether. And is that a superhuman superpower? Right? And I've tried to do it. I have. I've said that. Okay.
You'd be lying if you haven't tried it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I have not left the ground. I have not left the ground. Superpowers for me, when I look at this, um, I I think that we all have the gift of something. It's just a question of recognizing it when it happens, and then when you do recognize it, do you believe it yourself, inside of yourself? How do you resolve it? I've often wondered about that, and I don't think that there is any question when we look at something really small, such as, and people talk about this all the time. Oh man, that's right. Bob in sixth grade. Whatever happened to that guy? Man, I haven't talked to him in 10 years. And then Bob calls on the phone. And you see the phone call and you say to yourself, well, that's straight. Now, is that a superhuman superpower? I would suggest that it is, but it's also something that could be expanded into something else, right? The talent of learning to paint or play guitar, or tap into whatever that is you just tapped into, and then turn it into a superhuman superpower.
I see what you mean there. And the thing is that with this topic, and we're going to be getting into so many different aspects here, but when we're looking at superpowers, everyone has their own, in a sense, interpretation. Many people consider Superman flying, and then having some kind of kryptonite, as we hear a thousand times. But there are instances where we classify a superpower something that we do not possess, but someone else might. And when we're looking at the brain, there's so much that we are able to tap into. And when it comes to children, looking at specifics, they have what we might classify as superpowers more so than adults. And people that we're actually going to bring up a little bit later had their superpowers tapped into as children. For adults, it just takes a bit more time because we have these filters and these perceptions and this foundation that's already been laid for us throughout the years, to where we tell ourselves we're not able to remote view, we're not able to astral project, so on and so forth. So I'd like to start off with the interest in this, very specifically during the Cold War, and it was classified as a psychic race where we had the United States and the then Soviet Union really doing intensive research into these types of superpowers, such as psychic abilities, remote viewing. And it was for the purpose of military and intelligence. So I'm going to share my screen here as a visual aid to get into this topic, because when we're mentioning this is the first thing that needs to be brought up. This took place It started in the late 60s, and then it intensified in the 70s and 80s. So when we're looking at the 60s, reports of Soviet research into psychic phenomena began to surface, catching the attention of the United States intelligence community. And then in the 70s, the US began their own research into psychic phenomena with projects such as the Stanford Research Institute's, the RSI studies on remote viewing. And then during this psychic race, both the Soviet Union and the United States conducted various experiments and programs, which include, when looking at the Soviet Union first, they had the Soviet Institute of Brain Research. Then you had the Soviet Academy of Sciences. And then lastly, you had the KGB, which was the Soviet intelligence agency. And it also did research into espionage and counterintelligence when looking at psychic abilities. Now, coming to the United States, many people are familiar with Project Stargate, which was a then secret US Army unit that investigated the use of remote viewing for intelligence gathering, running from 1978 to 1995. And the CIA and the DIA, as the Defense Intelligence Agency, funded research into remote viewing at RSI and other institutes, which we can also talk about the Monroe Institute a little bit later. But here, during the 70s, and that time frame is going to be very, very prevalent for today's show. The 70s was like this really big burst, this really big interest in this topic. And Jimmy, let me ask you this. People have known about psychic abilities for millennia. It always plays out in cultures and all these oral stories, even in traditions as well. Why do you think the interest in it scientifically, at least to our public knowledge, gained traction in the 70s versus maybe years prior, decades prior to that?
Well, it's really simple, and especially with the United States and the then Soviet Union, today Russia, but the then Soviet Union, because there was a race for everything. Everybody wanted to be first, and nobody wanted to have the other side with an edge up on anything: space, weapons, technology, any manufacturing. Everything came into play here. And so when the rumors started, especially when it comes to weapons, space race, the missiles, and all of that. Nobody wanted to give up the edge. And then the rumors started that the Russians had psychic abilities. Now, you have to stop right there. It's like, okay, now we're in the psychic race, right? We're in the telekinesis race, because what is involved here? Well, obviously, you can't see it. That's the first thing. Let me give you the second big reason. It's pretty cheap to do. You're not building missiles. You're not building ships. You're not arming and building the huge infantry. You're not doing any of that. What if a psychic, somebody with some abilities, could sit in an office and do stuff, see stuff, possibly move stuff, telekinesis, start fires, right? And you don't have to deploy this person. You don't have the expense of that. You don't have the danger of that. And when it comes to spying, spying involves what? Well, you are going to either have somebody inside of the Soviet Union that is a current spy that you're going to flip. That's dangerous. That's dangerous for them, and that's dangerous to get the contact happening. Or you're going to send a U.S. citizen as a spy into the Soviet Union and spy. That is also very, very dangerous. You're putting people's lives in danger. What if you could do that from the safety of an office somewhere in the United States? Think about that for a second, right? So you're not putting lives at risk, and nobody knows that you're doing it. You can't see this person. You don't know what's going on. And that's where remote viewing and other efforts came into play, because it seemed that the Soviets were having success with this. They were pursuing it, and there was no way that the United States was going to let the Soviet Union get one up on us in this area. So they started work on it. And that's basically where SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, by the way, it's a real company, and they exist today. More on SRI here in a minute. But the United States then started their pursuit of psychics and people with these abilities, not only in remote viewing, but telekinesis and other psychic abilities. that was the main focus of SRI and the CIA and the Department of Defense. You're muted. Unmute yourself. Here, okay,
Thanks.
there you go.
I'm really glad that you brought those things up because it's going to actually lead into the next one. Because according to the Department of Justice, the Office of Justice Programs, in 1993, there was a paper written exactly about this and how the government and the psychics were working together. So here's what it says, quote, psychics include clairvoyants, telepaths, palmists, numerologists, numerologists, and metaphysicians. And both psychics and detectives base their work on intuition to some extent. Dorothy Allison of Nutley, New Jersey, has assisted police in more than 4,000 investigations and has received many letters from law enforcement agencies describing how she helped them. If you are enjoying the show, hit that like button right down below. I'm going to share my screen here on this next image. Oh, here we have Russell Targ when working for the SRI with Hal Putoff. But I want to get
Go
into
back,
this.
go back to that picture.
Okay.
I mean, I know these guys, and wow, kids, and they're still with
Yeah.
us. They're both,
Yeah.
and one thing about Russell, he is. I'm not too sure on this. I know he's in his 80s right now. Dude is like 6'8", and you can he's slouching here, but he is a big guy with a big brain. And Russell was very, very talented. And of course, and that's with SRI. They're standing in front of the SRI building. Hal Putoff today, noted engineer, dealing with UAP and ET and contact and metamaterials. But this is a very, very, very awesome picture of the two of them. Probably, if I'm going to guess here, I'm going to say 1970, 1971. Let's stay on this for a second. Keep that picture up because, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Polyester. The first highly classified project, which is where they are standing right now, was at SRI, the Stanford Research Institute. You can see the SRI logo. In 1970, 1971, and it was later moved to Fort Meade in Maryland. The CIA, the Army, the Defense Intelligence Agency recruited men and women from around the country claiming to have ESP, extrasensory perception powers, to help the military and domestic intelligence secrets. Now, in 2017, Cristina, the CIA declassified 12 million pages of records revealing the unknown details about the program, which would eventually become known as Project Stargate. By the time the program was shut down in 1995, 1995, psychics known as remote viewers had taken part in a wide variety of operations, locating hostages from the kidnapped Islamic terrorist groups to tracing the paths of fugitive criminals within the United States. And they founded SRI. Now, listen to this, and then we'll move on. SRI was founded in 1946, a year before Roswell, a year before the CIA, as the Stanford Research Institute. It went independent in 1970. That's this photograph that we are looking at here. They acquired Sarnoff Corporation, formerly RCA Labs, in 1987. And this is also key. They now own the Palo Alto Research Center, known as PARC, one of the central developers of everything computer and maybe even ET related that allows us to do this show today. So they now own PARC. They have 1,500 researchers. And right now their contracts are with the United States government. And they have some commercial customers too as well. Now, today, SRI is getting deeper into AI. They have always done AI, going back to Jacques Vallée in the late 60s and early 70s. And I have discussed this personally with Jacques. And some of the first AI programs written by Jacques Vallée were in late 1968, all in work with SRI. They also say that they have technology and education. They're working with biomedicines. They're working with robotics, and they claim to have created new industries, billions of dollars of market value, and lasting benefits that continue through today. Let's look at this picture again of Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and these statements by SRI. The roots of Project Stargate started in 1972 and continued all the way through to 1995.
And a fun little fact about the SRI, the CIA funded this project with about $20 million in hand, which I think is really interesting. It's always nice to see how much a project is spending. And my question is, that's a lot of money, especially during the 1970s. What are they
That
really
was
doing with it? In what ways are they using that money? Just because obviously, hopefully, you'll be paying the people that you're having to study, people such as Ingo Swann, Pat Price, and Monteagle as well. You have those, and hopefully they're getting paid in the millions. That'd be pretty awesome, along with Targ and Hal Puthoff here. But you don't need a significant amount of equipment that's incredibly expensive in order to study what is going on, since it really does focus on the person and their results. So I think that was pretty cool. A little more on that, they did assist the SRI with the people that they had on their team and that they were also researching. They helped in drug trafficking, in hostage situations, as well as combat threats posed by terrorists, aside from what they were already doing with attempting to spy on the Soviet Union. Getting into our next one, this is really interesting. Going back to what was published in 1993 by the Department of Justice, where they mention a woman by the name of Dorothy Allison, and she started helping law enforcement agencies back in the 1960s, so we're still in that time frame, all the way up until the 1990s, I believe. And she helped law enforcement find missing people, homicides, and other criminal investigations. She had mentioned in an interview that she was able to possess these powers as a child, and it's not necessarily remote viewing from what I understood, but it was more of like catching it in dreams or just having visions in order to help law enforcement. She assisted in the disappearance of Patricia Hearst, along with the Atlanta child murders and the murder of Nirvana Mikal as well. And this is all happening during that time frame between the 70s and the 80s. Those are some of her more famous cases, but again, she has assisted in more than 4,000 cases. This is something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, where people that we're going to be mentioning started possessing these abilities in their childhood. Now, could we classify this as a superpower or just maybe a freak show? It's hard to say because not everyone possesses that in the moment where they're able to have visions or catch things in dreams, but I do believe that it is very possible that every person has the capability and the ability to do so. A lot of these experts that practice remote viewing, that are psychics, mediums, so on and so forth, they do mention in their interviews or even in their books that it is possible for anyone. It's really just about quieting the mind and believing that you are able to do it. But we place so many barriers in our mind that we tell ourselves, no, I can't do it. Or you have these preconceived ideas that you do not have the ability to do it. Therefore, you're going to fulfill that prophecy that you gave yourself. And this is where these people come in. And I think it really inspires those that read it to think to themselves, I can do this. Now, to be fair, I've had that mentality and I have not achieved any of those things just yet. But hey, sometimes I wake up and I'll see if I can use my Jedi mind tricks and try to levitate the phone into my hand,
Right.
and it
Yeah,
happened
we
right.
all do that. We all do that. And Dorothy was very unique. And now, would I classify this as a superpower? Well, in 1976, she helped locate the body of Debbie Klein and naming the men who raped and murdered her in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania in 1976. Now, is that a superpower? Yeah, that's not. You have to go outside of the realm of chance, right?
Right.
What that's the thing here. Now the that ability to do something like that, and she also worked on the Son of Sam murders in 1976 too, as well. Um, but to do that, if you take whatever that gift is, right? And it's going down to the quantum level, man. This is something else going on with consciousness and the ability to tap into some electromagnetic, some type of power. That is, I would classify that as a superpower. And if you could take that and whatever it is that you're doing to steer in a certain direction, what if you could take that and train yourself to use it for something else and to do something else with it? In Dorothy's case, she focused on that, as other psychics do and remote viewers. But you're tapping in to an energy source that is out there that we don't yet understand. I would call that a superhuman superpower for sure.
We could even apply the idea that we hear from a lot of spiritual kind of gurus and even religions as well, where they mention that everything and everyone is interconnected. And with that, we have this essence, as the stories go, that we have this ability to tap into the cosmos, the Akashic records, like the clairvoyant Edgar Casey, right? We have this ability. It's just being, did I say disability? We have this ability, but it's just learning how to tap into it. Getting into the idea of remote viewing, this is interesting. Jimmy, we've done a whole show on remote viewing. We even ran some tests as well to have a little fun with it. It is something that can be learned. There are classes that teach you how to remote view. It's becoming, I don't wanna use the word more prevalent. A lot of people still don't know about it or they don't practice it, but it's more of an open conversation because, again, you can literally find classes online or in person to help you be better at remote viewing. A fun little fact, Russell Targ does have a website where he has, like, a few free classes or, like, even apps that will show you how to remote view. If you're into that stuff, I would say look into it. It is pretty cool. I've tried it. I've downloaded the app. It didn't work for me, but to be fair, I already put myself out there that I didn't know how to do it, and that was my fault. But if you wanna try it, it is very cool. Now getting into remote viewing, this is really interesting because, again, there was, a more structural study during the Cold War in the late '60s, '70s, and '80s, and it's something that there's a lot of, there's some movies about it, there's some TV shows about it. You had mentioned the movie during when we did the episode of remote viewing. It was called what? Goats?
Oh, the
What's
men
the
who
movie
stare
called?
at goats. The men who stare at
Yes,
goats. Yeah, it's a great
yes.
movie. It's funny.
They
It's
were
good.
also
It's well
looking
done.
into that. Right, right, and law enforcement, they still do hire remote viewers in order to assist them in their investigations that require looking for people or, objects. It's still being done today, it's still being practiced today, anyone has the ability to do it, and I think that in itself does add a level of, I want to use the word inspiration here to demonstrate that we all have the capability. We can all do it. And this, I would say, is a superpower because, Jimmy, have you ever had an instance, and I know you have, as everybody else has, where you misplace your keys, maybe your phone, maybe your wallet, and you can't find it anywhere, and you look in all of the places and you just can't find it. It's in those moments where you want to tell yourself, man, I wish I could remote view to find it. I'll tell you a quick story about this. This happened to me not too long ago. I was getting a drink from the fridge and I placed, like an idiot, I placed my phone in the fridge. I sit back
What?
down and I think to myself, where's my phone? What happened to my phone? I'm looking all over the place. I am just turning the place upside down, going through all the drawers and everything. And I think to myself, you know what? All of this hunting is making me really hungry. And I open the fridge, and you guessed it, my phone was there. And I thought to myself, if only I could remote view to have found it in the first place before letting it freeze in the fridge.
I got to tell you, that would be the last place that I would look for something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
would be the absolute last place. That's it. That's just head slap on that one. That's a good one. That's a good one. If Yeah, I mean, unless you were hungry, you might not or thirsty, you might not find your phone for a few days. You're never going to look there. You're never going to
No.
look there. Now, at the beginning of the week, I had on Robert M. Knight on the show. And if you haven't listened to the show, you can go check it out. Robert M. Knight, rock and roll photographer, one of the greatest in the world, but also a researcher of the paranormal and ET and everything else. And he was really close friends with Ingo Swann. And when we talk about SRI and Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and Jacques Vallée and Joseph McMoneagle and Pat Price, Ingo Swann, front and center, most consider him the most gifted. Well, Pat Price would have said something different, but Pat Price was taken out by the CIA. That's another conversation for another time. But Ingo, yes, okay. So remote viewing behind enemy lines and looking at the Soviet Union and everything else. Yeah, Ingo definitely had the gift and definitely caught the attention of the CIA. And you're right about that. $20 million in 1972 was all the money. That's a serious amount of dosh. Okay. But
Especially when we're comparing it to the budget of ATIP that had 22 million, and there we would
that was
assume they are
modern
using
money. That
well,
was
exactly
modern
more money,
money.
but you're also using more advanced equipment, and you probably have more head in the office, right? More people. So when you're comparing these two numbers together, many years apart, a few decades apart, right? My question is, what do they do with all that funding? Because it's a lot. I just wanted to bring that up, and
Yeah,
also
yeah,
enjoy thinking for that.
yeah. It's a great one there, Android. Thank you so much for that, by the way. But you want to talk superhuman with Ingo Swann? I'm going to
Mm.
share something with you that you probably don't know. Okay, now you want to talk about superhuman superpowers? Swann did a remote viewing session. Now, everybody, listen to what I'm about to share with you. Listen very closely. He did a remote viewing session of the planet Jupiter and Jupiter's moons prior to Voyager probe's visit there in 1979. All right. Now, we know nothing about Jupiter, right? We've been taking pictures, looking at it in telescopes and stuff, but we know nothing. Swann, at the beginning of this session, asked for 30 minutes of silence. Okay. Now, check this out. His ability to see Jupiter took about 3.5 minutes. Okay. In the session, he made several reports on the physical features of Jupiter, such as its atmosphere and the surface of its core. Swann saw bands of crystals in the atmosphere, which he compared to the clouds and possibly like the rings of Saturn. Dun, dun, dun. Listen to me. The Voyager probe later confirmed the existence of the rings of Jupiter, although these rings are not in the planet's atmosphere. However, Swan's claim that crystals are present in the atmosphere is supported by the observations by NASA's Galileo spacecraft of the clouds of ammonia ice crystals in the northwest corner of Jupiter's Great Red Spot. That is superhuman. That is so precise and so direct and wasn't confirmed until we sent technology there. Now, if that isn't a gift, that is not chance. That is not guessing. He was very direct and very precise. And that's why when we talk about things like this, Ingo Swann, certainly specifically, and Uri Geller and Joseph McMoneagle and Pat Price, yeah, I get all of that. But this was a test done with Ingo Swann that was later confirmed by not only Voyager, but much, much later, the Galileo project. And that really says a lot to me, Christina.
It does, and it seems that if we're gonna bring that up, talking about not only remote viewing, but seeing things before they are proven, we could even talk about clairvoyance and precognition. Some of the most famous people that we're aware of include Edgar Casey and Nostradamus, along with Baba Vanga as well. And these people, I think it's really cool that they're able, allegedly, to see the future. Now, some of these things have been proven. Like when we look at Edgar Casey, for instance, he was known as the sleeping prophet, and he's written many books. You can find them and you can follow along, just like with Nostradamus. People have dedicated their lives to really understand what parts that those references that he made have fallen in history. But when we're looking at Edgar Casey to begin with, and actually, let me share an image here. Let me so people know who I'm talking about. Here he is. All right, here's Edgar Casey. Oh, and W. Decker, thank you for that. I nominate that NASA name our next high-end telescope Ingo Swann. Hey, you know what? If there's a little votey thingy, a poll, I'm
I'm
voting.
so down. I'm so down for that, Decker.
Thank you for that.
That was pretty good. By the way, fun fact:
Fun fact.
Decker. That's his name in oh
Blade Runner?
no, yeah, Blade Runner. Decker.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
So
Decker. Thank
looking
you.
at
Thank you for covering my brain freeze.
I got you. I love that movie. So looking at Edgar Casey, one thing that he did find is that he discovered the Dead Sea Scroll. So in 1929, Casey predicted that ancient documents would be found in Egypt near the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947. That's just one of a few things that ended up coming to light. Now, looking at Nostradamus, he's a lot more cryptic because he wrote very poetically. And so it's with him he wrote a book called The Prophecies, and it had 942 poetic entries allegedly predicting future events, and he was alive between 1503 and 1566. As I had mentioned just a few minutes ago, people have dedicated their lives to attempt and understand what he wrote and apply it. For instance, people believe that he predicted 9/11, World War II, and a few others. But then there's someone else I want to bring up, and I don't have an image of him, but we're gonna keep going with it. And his name was Gerald Cressett, and I probably said that wrong because to me it looks like the word croissant, but we're not going to do that. He was a Dutch psychic and a parapsychologist who gained international fame for his psychic detective work, for his assistance in various criminal investigations between he was born in 1909 and passed away in the 1980s, and he was helping law enforcement back in the 1940s. Why is this relevant, Jimmy? That's a rhetorical question. The answer is because the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s was just this weird time for psychics to be helping law enforcement. We just spoke about the woman not too long ago, and I'm just going to repeat her name, Dorothy Allison. And then now we have Gerald, who is also or
Gerard.
Gerard.
Yeah,
Gerard.
Gerard.
And I'm calling him Gerald because I'm so American. It's
That's fine.
Gerard because he's Dutch. Thank you, Jimmy. This is why I have you. You correct me when I need correcting. So he he was able to obtain information about an object or a person by touching or being in close proximity to an object associated with him. This is a different kind of what we could classify as a superpower. And we could even bring the topic of the paranormal phenomenon where you have objects that have attachments. And so here, he's able to get a pen or a sweater or a hair tie, right, from the person that owned it and be able to tap into extra information. This is really bizarre. And we're able to potentially bring in, I want to say, like, we're able to bring in the idea of frequencies that all objects vibrate at their own
Energies.
frequencies
Yeah,
and
yeah.
energies, right?
Right,
And
right.
then you can tap into that almost code to understand a little bit more about the object. A lot of people aren't able to do that. You can totally BS it as for a lot of these superpowers, but when it is genuine, it is absolutely mind blowing. And we are aware that an atom is 99.9% empty. It is always vibrating. That's how we get solids, liquids, and gases. You learn this in elementary school, but they do vibrate at their own frequency. And when you're able to tap into that, supposedly, you're able to understand a little bit more about it. Do you think that would be a little overwhelming, Jimmy, just because everything at some point, an object has been touched by someone and maybe they're able to transport their emotions or their thoughts into something? Don't you think that'd be a lot of psychic noise to deal with?
Yeah, and it would be. It would be. And in his case, with Gerard Crosset, he uh, he his record of success. His record of success was having the craziest hair known to man. So there's that. But his record of success wasn't that great. In fact, some would say it wasn't good at all. But the cases that he did crack, he was spot on. He just wasn't spot on all of the time. But the odds of him cracking the cases that he did do were extraordinary, extraordinary for sure. And then you have to kind of flip this over. Are you taking chances? And for law enforcement, as a psychic or somebody with these abilities, are you taking chances? Are you sending people on a wild goose chase? Right, where they're going to expend a lot of resources, time, money, manpower into something that is not going to have a result. That's the danger that you risk, not only as a psychic and your reputation, but also as an agency and a law enforcement agency, where you're going to be not only money and time, but while you're off doing that, the real criminal is off possibly harming somebody else or doing something else. That's the danger here. But can you afford to not take the chances? Right? So that's the thing. Dorothy and Gerard had those same issues, but the cases that they did solve and they were spot on about, those were the ones where people go, well, yeah, I know it didn't work here, but this case was very specific and the case was cracked and solved because of them. And so, yeah, I would call that a superhuman superpower. But I'm going to change gears. I'm going to change gears. Everybody just go with me on this. Cristina, go with me. Stay with me on this. I'm going to talk about real superpowers. Okay. Shakuntala Devi. Okay. Now, I am going to say out of real superhuman superpowers, that's this woman right here. I mean, like for real. Okay. In 1977, she was known as the human calculator. All right. Now I'm going to give you two instances. In 1977, at Southern Methodist University, she gave the 23rd root, the 23rd root of a 201 digit number in 50 seconds. Her answer, which was 546,372,891, was confirmed by calculations done at the U.S. Bureau of Standards by the UNIVAC 1101 computer, for which a special program had to be written to perform such a large calculation, which took longer time than for her to do it. Now, that's superhuman. And if that doesn't convince you enough, I'm going to give you this gift. On June 18th, 1989, I just want you to digest this. I want you to chew on this. Digest this. June 18th, 1980, she demonstrated the multiplication of two 13-digit numbers. Okay? 7,686,369,774,870 times 2,465,999,745,779. Okay? Multiply those two numbers. These numbers were picked at random by the Department of Computing at Imperial College in London. She correctly answered, I don't know how big this number is. Okay. I don't go past trillions. Okay. But it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 digits. 1-894-766-817-795-426-462-773-730 in 28 seconds.
My goodness.
That's superhuman. That's a superhuman superpower. Yeah. Yeah. She would give classes on this and she would teach people how to do it. She was absolutely amazing. There are a lot of people with the ability to do pi, and they've got different, some after brain trauma, right? Some after illness,
Right.
where these gifts are given. And I've seen a lot of documentaries on this, and it's a fascinating thing. In her case, she was born with the gift, and that's insanity to me. And that is truly, to me, a superhuman superpower. Just absolutely amazing.
And while we're on this, I would like to cover some other child prodigies because she was one of them. But another one that many
My,
people should be familiar with being Robert Bobby Fischer. And at 14 years old, he won the World Chess Championship, becoming the youngest winner of the title. And then in that year, he captured the attention of the chess world with what has since been dubbed the game of the century. And then he broke another record the following year when he became the youngest international grandmaster of all times at the age of 15. He's always had an interest, but it was during his early teen years that he was really catching the attention of people. Then we can even bring in people's favorite band, Mozart.
yeah,
Wolfgang Mozart. Can we just talk
yeah,
about how awesome his name is? Just number
yeah.
one. But
Coolest name ever. Coolest name
yes.
ever.
Yes, it is. But here's the second thing about him, aside from his super cool name, and that was at the age of 3, 3 years old. Mozart played the
Va-
harpsichord, which is similar harps. I said it right. Don't wait. Did I say it right?
harpsichord.
Harpsichord, thank you, which is very similar to a piano, but not a piano. And then by the age of 6, he had written his first musical composition. And this was followed by the first symphony at the age of 8 and an opera at 12 years old. Could you just imagine, number one, playing an instrument at that age and then fully comprehending how to write music and then and then create a symphony and an opera before the age of 13, before even hitting puberty? It's unbelievable. But I have one more for you. Actually, one more thing before we even get into that.
Well, can I
Mozart,
make one point about Mozart though?
go
We
ahead.
okay. He was born with a piano. And the question is, how did his mom do it? That's all I'm saying. Okay, move on.
Oh, at a young age and just like the noise.
No,
Like,
man, how,
oh, I get it.
yeah. How'd that happen? I'm just saying. I mean, look, he apparently, now nobody was around back then to see this, but apparently he was born with the ability to play the violin and piano. He had that. That's it. By the age of 3, playing the violin. By the age of 5, he's composing. Age of 5. What were you doing at the age of 5? You were goofing around trying to get 2 Legos to go together, right? Right? By the age of 5, he was already composing on the violin. The violin. He's known as a composer of symphonies and, of course, piano. But he played everything. But age of 3, 4, and 5, he was already playing the piano and composing on the violin. That's absolutely superhuman. Something is channeled. Something came in. Something was in his DNA. Something reincarnation. I don't know, but it was certainly superhuman.
Definitely. And then he passed away at the age of 35. And by that time, he left behind 600 composed pieces. I have one more child prodigy that I would like to cover, and it's this guy right here. His name is Kim Ung Yong. And at the age of 3 years old, he began taking courses. I cannot. He began taking courses as a guest physics student at the Hanyang University in South Korea. And by the age of 8, he was invited by NASA to study in the United States. He was born in 1962, and he is listed as having the highest IQ at 210 in the Guinness Book of World Records. But there's more, because at 4 months, when he was 4 months old, okay, he already learned how to speak. And then when he was 2 years old, he was able to speak and read Japanese, Korean, German, and English. At 16, Kim left NASA and decided to attend college in South Korea to earn a doctorate in civil engineering.
Yeah, that's insane. That's superhuman.
This makes
That
me feel
is
like a
super.
failure in every
Yeah,
way.
I'm telling you.
Reading
I'm
this kind of
telling you.
stuff.
I think about when I was a kid, and and I know it was a different time and everything else, but there were people around me at that time that were also doing extraordinary things. So I can't use the excuse, right, that it was the time period, because other things were going down. And let's talk about Uri Geller for a second. I want to get Uri in. Uri was a guest on Fade to Black. It was one of the funnest conversations that I've ever had on the show. And with Uri, lots of controversy around him. I get that, but I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this image. And there it is. Now, this was a test. Now, I want you to look. It says right here, approved for release. Right? There it is, 2003 by the CIA. This is from the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA does a test with Uri. And in back at SRI when the CIA started funding the project and they're pulling everybody in. Again, we keep going back to the familiar names of Hal Puthoff and Jacques Vallée and Russell Targ and Joseph McMoneagle, and Pat Price came along later. And Ingo Swann. Well, Uri Geller was a big focus of this, and Uri was a focus because of his appearance on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was doing not only television in Israel, but his name really started to get elevated. And he would fix broken watches, and he would bend spoons, and he would do all of these things. Well, the CIA pulls him over to SRI, and they do a test. So, 2 separate rooms. You have the CIA and the case officers in the room, and they draw a picture. And that's on the left. And it's of a kite. That's a kite, right? With its tail and a string on it. In the other room, Uri Geller drew that picture. Now, I'm just saying, you can talk about parlor tricks and bending and spoons and fixing broken watches for audience members and all of that fun stuff. But that is not chance. It's simply not. And the CIA was certainly impressed with this image that I'm showing you here. Now, Cristina, I'm going to ask you directly. You've seen a lot of amazing stuff. On the left is the CIA's drawing of a kite. On the right is Uri Geller's drawing that he did from the other room. What do you think?
Yeah, it looks pretty similar. Yeah, you could classify this as remote viewing, which we know is possible. It has been tested on. The SRI was a great example of that, is a great example of that as well. It's You're able to see the similarities. It wasn't just drawn by chance.
It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. And Uri Geller, let me pull this down. Uri Geller had a lot of controversy around him. And so as all of this was going on, Andrea Puharich, who, Santa Barbara, California, and would gather different people with different backgrounds into his circle, mediums, psychics, industrialists, successful people, engineers, physicists. And they would just kind of hang out at Andre's house. Well, Uri Geller met Andrea in 1971. And Andrea endorsed him as a genuine psychic. And this was a big deal. And then Andrea said, are you ready for this? Under hypnosis, Geller claimed he was sent to Earth by extraterrestrials from a spaceship that was 53,000 light years away. And so most would jump back and go, okay, all right, hold on a minute here, Uri. You're pushing things. But Puharich had a pretty solid reputation. He's pretty crazy, but he was also a very smart guy. Puharich also stated that weekend, right, when all of this stuff was going down, that Geller teleported his dog through the walls of his house. Right. Which takes us to telekinesis, right? And these abilities, and is this all possible? Now, Uri later said, I never said that under hypnosis, or it was something else. I've never claimed to be extraterrestrial, but my abilities may be from ET. So Uri tried to backtrack on Puharich's claims, but he never backtracked on the teleporting of dogs through walls, which was pretty fascinating. Which takes us to, what do you think about fire starters and telekinesis and moving stuff.
I think it's very possible. And there's something that I'd really like to ask you, Jimmy, and those watching this or listening to this. This is a okay. So let's say just for a moment, right? That extraterrestrials, maybe even interdimensionals, are able to perform telekinetic abilities, telepathy, teleportation, right? All of these things. Why are they able to do it more freely than people? What are the differences there? They're able to do it that we can't. Is it because they are able to tap into some kind of cosmic who knows what better than we can? Do they have
Right.
the DNA for it? Why is the DNA relevant when it
Right.
comes to these kinds of superpowers? Is it because they're able to tell that maybe everything is a simulation, that we're living in the matrix, and you're able to manipulate that? So it's like a mind thing, a
Right.
perception thing. There are all these questions that were going through my mind when you were talking about this story, real or not, about Uri Geller being extraterrestrial. Just the thought of that, why is it possible for some, but not necessarily as easy for others? And if we compare extraterrestrials with ourselves, what things differ between the both of us to where they are able to possess those abilities that maybe humans are not? And how come some of them are and others aren't? Do they have this level of a little more alien DNA than your average person? Because here's the weird thing, when we look at the study of DNA, a big chunk of it scientists have classified as trash DNA, unnecessary, unused, or even misunderstood or not understood at all. Could that in itself, because I'm just going to touch on this really fast, it could all be a part, allegedly, of the hybridization program, that humans have this mix with alien DNA, and that's why scientists at this point in time are not fully able to understand those little tidbits when it comes to human DNA, that they're not able to fully decide or understand. That's why they throw it away in the trash bin. But then do some have more than others? I mean, there are so many questions here that I know it's very difficult to answer. And these are all just hypothetical questions, or maybe even based off of alleged information. But we have to ask ourselves these things. And at the same time, we have to be skeptical that any of this could even be true. When you experience it for yourself, that's for the most people all the truth that they need, all the evidence that they need. But Uri Geller has been going around the country displaying his abilities, displaying him bending spoons, stopping clocks. And what's also odd about Uri Geller is that he's had his hand with celebrities. A great example of this is John Lennon. After he had his UFO sighting back in the 70s, the first person he called was Uri Geller. And a little bit later, according to the stories at the very least, he says John Lennon tells Geller, "Hey, these aliens, they gave me this rock egg and I want you to see it. I told nobody else but yourself." Geller looks at it according to the story and he says, "Yep, this is alien, it's not human, and they wanted to give it to you for whatever reason." This is one of several stories where celebrities and people in high places have contacted Gettler. And the question is, why him versus anybody else? There seems to be something special about him. Maybe it's his influence, maybe it's his celebrity status, or it could be something a little bit more that some might know better than others.
Now, okay, there's that part of Geller, and then there's the part that nobody really knows about. So after this celebrity rise that he had in the 1970s and the recognition of his gifts, well, okay, you have the CIA, sure. You have the military, sure. And then you have those that want to make money, big money, like oil, gold, diamonds. Let's go to Geller and see if he can tell us where to drill, where to mine. And they did. And in exchange, Uri took stock, didn't take cash. And these oil companies, these mining companies hit it big because he said, drill here, dig for gold there. The diamonds are over there. And that's where he got his money. And he is rich. He didn't have to go to Vegas. He didn't have to go to, have a magic show like David Copperfield. He didn't have to do anything. That's why he disappeared forever. His success was with large corporations running in the background. That's who came and tapped in to Uri Geller's talent. And it doesn't take long, does it? Right? Doesn't take long for the corporate greed to come in and tap into somebody's gift like this. But that's what happened with Uri. And to take stock instead of money because he knew he was right. Right? Now, if you're wrong or if you're playing games, okay, yeah, I'll do it, but I want $1 million up front. Right? It's a whole nother thing to go, yeah, I'll do it. Just give me stock in the company before I tell you what to do, because that's where the big money is. And that's what's interesting about Uri Geller. So I thought I'd share that with you before we move. I want to talk a little. We at the beginning of the show, we've got to swing back. Russia and telekinesis. I spent, and you can do this. You can do this online. You can go and look at. There's a lot of it's black and white, a lot of film and video of Russia's experiments over the years and how they were working with this. And that's right, Nina Kulagina. She is without a doubt the most famous of these. What's the word I want to use? People that had telekinesis. Let's just put it that way for now. She was somebody that, well, first off, she claimed that she had psychic powers and psychic abilities, caught the attention of the KGB, caught the attention of the Russian military, and of course, Russian, I'm saying, or USSR. And they brought her in. This is also the work with her is what caught the attention of the United States and the CIA and forced the hand of the creation of Project Stargate and SRI. But it was Nina. And go and watch the videos of her moving objects on a table, moving stuff under glass. She was for 20 straight years, Cristina. The last 20 years of her life were all spent being studied by the Russian government.
When we're looking at this case and maybe other people that have shown their telekinetic abilities, people are very quick to say no, it's fake. No, she's using a string and that's that. When we're looking at this particular woman, Nina, who was born in 1926 and passed away in 1990, she did go under extensive tests by the KGB, by the USSR. And from our understanding, when it comes to those government agencies, right? If she were to have lied and like treated them like they were dumb, she would have she would have died. There's no way that she would be able to still kind of show that, or it was a ploy in order for the USSR to demonstrate to the United States that they had people with superpowers to show their dominance. There's two ways to look at this. Either she was absolutely telling the truth, and if she wasn't, she was going to go into prison or something even worse, or it was to just kind of lift some muscles, right? And say, I'm super cool and you are not. It's one of two ways, but she did go under extensive tests. She did go under a lot of scrutiny as well. And you, you got to take it or leave it. You got to be skeptical, but you have to think about it on your own time on if you believe this person or not. So she had been studied on for about 20 years. And this is just one famous picture of just a few actually to where it shows her showing some like you're able to see it in her face, some kind of difficulty, some kind of strain for her to levitate this ball in the middle of her hands. She had mentioned that in order for her to do such things, she was able to do it as a child, and she was able to move objects around her when she was very angry or feeling extreme emotions. And she reported needing focused meditation and experiencing physical discomfort before telekinetic feats. And the Soviet scientists in Leningrad became very interested in studying her during her time that she was alive, but very specifically in the 60s and 70s, and then also into the 80s as well. She is one of the more famous people that have displayed telekinetic abilities that has not been in the category of a magician, right? That it's all fakery, but there seems to be a little bit more to it.
He got now allegedly. I'm going to say this. She's no longer with us, and she did win a court case. She did. She sued. She sued and won a defamation case, which is kind of rare in the Soviet Union. She was accused of using magnets, strings, and wires. I don't know how you wouldn't be caught by the KGB and whoever, these universities in the Soviet Union that were studying her under controlled situations, how these types of instruments could be introduced without anybody else knowing it, right? Wasn't she searched? Right? Isn't it a control? The table is checked and brought. I don't know, but she did end up winning half of a court case. She won the defamation side. Was it vindication? That's a whole other point altogether. When you watch her videos and her moving objects on a table and some of it under glass and glass bowls and things, it's pretty interesting. And it reminded me a little bit of Caroline Corey's film Superhuman when you see what is going on there. Now, it's not only moving stuff with telekinesis under glass, which I think is an electromagnetic property that you're using your consciousness to access something in the ether, right? Something electromagnetic, which is affecting the atoms at the quantum level in the object underneath the glass, and that you are doing that. And eventually you're affecting enough of the molecules and particles to cause movement. It takes a lot of power to do that. The power of the mind. You brought up ET earlier. I want to address this really quick. We, by most guesstimates, we use about 5 to 7% of our brain. Okay. Why did we develop the rest of our brain if we're not tapping into it? Or have we always been able to tap into it? We just don't know why. And that the 5 to 7% that we're using, that's in the physical world. But is the rest of it something that is used for that we don't understand yet? And that it was developed to do something and we haven't tapped into it. ET has figured that out. And of course, I'm pointing straight at consciousness and the universe and the unseen. Well, would ET, can you imagine if we used 100% of our brain? Not only to calculate and to think and for memories and for cognition, right? And decision making. I get that computing power. But what if we used it for something else, right? Telepathy, mind reading, moving of objects. Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge amount of how much we do with that 5 to 7% is amazing. And we're just now trying to get AI to catch up to that. But what if we tapped into the other 85, 90, 95% of the brain that apparently we're not using yet? And we have to think about that, which brings us to, I don't want to run out of time, but before we move on, what do you think would happen to the world, Christina, if we tapped into that other 90%?
From my understanding, the 10% of using the brain is not entirely accurate. Now, what's interesting is 20 per like according like when we are using energy, our body's energy consumption, the brain uses 20%. That's a lot of computing power that it needs, right? Now, the brain in total, we use all bits and pieces of it, and the 10%, we're not actually able to pinpoint on how we got that information as of yet. Now, is that true
That's
when it
right.
comes to only using that much? It's a possibility. But the thing is that with these people that have these kinds of powers, tapping in to clairvoyance, precognition, it seems like that they're tapping into something outside of themselves. But then there's also the little tidbit, the aspect of chi and energy. For instance, where you have this person right here on screen in the 1990s, his name was John Chang, also known as Dynamo Jack, and he had displayed his chi powers to ignite a piece of paper into fire with nothing around him. There was no petroleum there, not petroleum, but there was no gasoline on the paper. He wasn't using a lighter. And this video you can find online. He was using his chi in order to ignite this sheet of paper. As soon as he burnt it and it caught whiff of the internet, he went on a retreat from the public eye and he went into seclusion. And then we can also bring up, and this is all going to be relevant in just a moment. We can also bring up this very famous picture that took place in 1963 when you had a monk in Vietnam that was protesting against the South Vietnamese government's uh, prosecution of Buddhists, and he set himself on fire. And you can tell his very calm and poised face right here. You see the petroleum on the side where another monk actually, not petroleum, I keep, you know what I want to say, poured it on this monk and then he set himself on fire. These kinds of powers demonstrate the ability not only of chi when it comes to Dynamo Jack, but here for this monk to not attach to the body and to almost leave it in that moment while the corpse is still there. When we talk about these monks, for instance, these kinds of people, looking at their abilities, they're classified as Arhat abilities, which when we're looking at the Buddhist tradition, it is those that have reached a certain level in their cultivation to where they are able to levitate, to open portals, to move objects with like telekinesis, right? To detach from the body and to have things like this happen to them. But in order to be an arhat, according to Buddhist beliefs and even Hindu beliefs as well, number one, you can't attach to it, and number two, you're not able to display those abilities. So, for instance, for Dynamo Jack, as soon as the internet caught whiff of what he did online, he left the public eye because, according to legend, is that he was the person that taught him that, who must have been an arhat, maybe. Um, frowned, like, what did not agree to what he did, and he was forced. Now, is that true? That's just according to legend. But the thing is that if you were ever to ask, if you go into a Buddhist temple or even a Hindu temple, right, and you ask them to display a superpower to you, they won't. They're not allowed to. In this case, this was to this picture that we're seeing here in 1963, it was to really go against the South Vietnamese government, and it did so well that the 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 leader of that time was people were against him. The United States stopped helping him. And then there was an assassination just a few months after that. Just because when he had gained power, he was like, nope, we're going to be a Catholic country. We're not all going to be Buddhist. And during that time frame, Vietnam was very heavily Buddhist. So here you have this image that really put things in motion. But when we're looking at these Arhat kind of abilities, yeah, they're absolutely fascinating. They're very, very cool, but they cannot be spoken about publicly. You're able at times to share them with your disciples, those that follow you and that follow the path of cultivation, but you're not able to share it usually with the general public without receiving some kind of consequence, especially if you have your ego attached to these abilities to where you want to show them off. There are certain consequences that come with that.
Yeah, there are. And you just brought up levitation too, as well, and talk about consequences. I mean, I've always been fascinated with levitation, and there were lots of pictures of it that started to float around in the 1970s. And the ability to levitate goes back a long, long ways, and especially in early Christianity. Um, the Acts of Peter gives a legendary tale of Simon Magus and his death. Okay, talk about consequences. Simon is a part of this tale about him performing magic at the Roman Forum. And in order to prove himself to be a god, he flies up into the air. The Apostle Peter prays to God to stop his flying, and he stops midair and falls, breaking his legs. And then after that, the crowd, previously non hostile, they're being entertained, sees him fly, sees him freeze in the air. When they beg God to stop this, he falls and breaks his leg. The crowd that was happy turns hostile, and they stone him to death on stage. So, is there a lesson here? Don't levitate in public. You know, it's very dangerous to your health. That's the first thing. No matter what you do, you're going to freak people out. Francis of Assisi is recorded to have been suspended above the earth, often to a height of 4 cubits, which is about 6 feet. Now, did this really happen? It's in the Bible. Is this superhuman? Don't know. But these levitations now, these are people that became saints, right? And you have to perform a miracle. Well, is levitation a miracle? Well, I would say it's certainly superhuman. Is it real? To get to that level, I'm not religious. I'm not going there at all. But to get to sainthood and to pass all of the tests, that's pretty tough. That's not
Well,
easy. It's not easy to do. Um, I,
what it
well, I've got one more before the break or before we wrap. Alphonsus Liguori, when preaching at Foggia, was lifted before the eyes of a whole congregation several feet from the ground. And he is also said to have the superhuman gift of bilocation, of teleporting. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Just to go back to your story about the Bible, there's one very similar in one of the Buddhist scriptures as well, because there was a monk by the name of Pindola, and he was able to also display these supernatural abilities, but it wasn't out of compassion to help people in the sense of like that kind of miracle, but it was to display his abilities and to gain fame from it. When the Buddha saw this, he frowned upon him and obviously, and then also took away his Arhat abilities to be able to display such as levitating and to show all of these other very supernatural type things because it was attached to his ego. Going into the little piece that you mentioned about miracles and how saints have to perform miracles in order to be a saint. Yes, it can be kind of difficult to conceptualize that, but there is a difference between doing it for the self, doing it for the ego to show how cool you are, versus doing it for someone else out of compassion to help alleviate their suffering. And I think that's a big difference on when to make a public or when to make what you're able to do private. And when we're looking at certain saints, across religions, right? They all have different names, but they're under the same idea. Those that have displayed miracles, it was to help other people. It's the same kind of thing like with prayer. Prayer could be classified as if you have a lot of people pray for you, right? It can alleviate your pain, it can alleviate any kind of maybe physical or mental issues that you might be going through because of that intention. Now, here's something that's been bothering me for the last few weeks. And Jimmy and those listening, maybe you'll be able to alleviate this little itchiness in my brain because there was this sumo tournament that just ended a few days ago, and I just got into sumo wrestling. I think it is the coolest thing ever. Fun little fact, but that's the
Okay.
only sport I ever watched.
I'm
But
trying I'm
the thing
trying to
is,
follow you here. I'm trying to
like,
follow you here.
here's the thing: when you are watching a sport, usually, right? Both teams, people get so passionate about the sport that they are praying to everything holy for their team to win.
Yes.
Okay. And you see a
Thank
lot of people
I like to
in
thank
the
God for
background
the victory today. Yes,
not
right?
only
Yeah.
thank God for the victory, but also say, I want my team to win. And you're praying super hard. You're like, come on, please. Right. And then here's what's bothering me on this because one team has to lose. Does that mean that those that are praying, their prayer is higher than the other? Is
I
it
know.
fully dependent on the team? Like,
Yeah,
when does prayer work and when does it not? And how are you able
right.
to measure it? The answer is you can't measure it. People will say it all depends on how true you are to the prayer. But the thing is that people say, pray for me when this and this happens. But then, like, if you look at sports, and this is a really great example, is that you have both teams profoundly praying for their team to
Yeah.
win,
Yeah.
and only one side wins.
Two Christian universities, right? At a football game. who's who's got the Jesus juice card? Who's got more holes punched, right? I often think about that. Now, after a boxing match and you got some guy laid out and I would like to thank God, today. Well, what about dude? Right, with the busted head. What about that? Well, there was this guy. You can look him up. His name was John the Wonder Worker. Do you remember that guy?
No.
John the Wonder Worker. Now, he died in 1966. Pretty famous guy. This is modern, right? We could talk about stuff from the Bible, but let's talk about John the Wanderer. Now, never really 100% verified, but there were stories going around about this guy that he would, in prayer, in a room, isolated, he would levitate in prayer. And people would watch him and spy on him and go, yeah, sure enough, he's levitating. Never got a picture of the guy, but John the Wanderer and his ability to levitate when he was by himself, right? Right? Now, we never got proof of that. Now, did it happen? Don't know. Look up John the Wanderer. Yeah, it's a pretty famous story. He was, I think he was like 50, 60 years old when he died. I'm guessing here. I'm picturing the pictures of him. Kind of died young, but 1966, and people were saying that they were peeking in and spying on him when he was in there praying, and he would always levitate. So if he did, it was superhuman. I'm going to leave that right there. I'll see everybody tonight on the show. Cristina, another great show today. We left a lot on the table. So much more to talk about when it's superhuman, superpowers, and other things. Maybe we should do a part 2. That will be a lot of fun. Tonight on Fade to Black, it's just a simple show. AMA, AJA, Ask Me, Ask Jimmy, anything. I get to hang out with all the Fadernauts, and you can test my knowledge and my ideas about crazy stuff. All right. So I'll see everybody tonight on the show. Cristina, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jimmy. This was a really fun topic just because we were able to cover so much and to ask a lot of questions. You do not have to believe everything that we covered today. We are just providing the information and then for you to make up your own mind. But let me end it with this. Everyone has the ability to do a lot of these things. Remote viewing can be taught. For instance, mediumship, we weren't able to cover, can also be taught. There's a lot of books on how to learn how to do it. The biggest thing is just quietening the mind and then telling yourself that you can do it because you probably can. Astral projection is another one of those things. But if you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button right down below. Hit the subscribe button as well if you haven't already, as I do 3 live shows right here on this channel every single week. Tomorrow is going to be strangest news of the week. You don't want to miss that. It will be live. So make sure to click on the notification bell so that you will be informed when that happens. Before you head out, first I want to say thank you for everyone watching this live, all the super chats, super stickers, YouTube members, all my amazing Patreon supporters, and of course, my incredible moderators that keep things rolling in the chat, sharing all the links. You are awesome. If you're watching this on a laptop or on a television, scan this QR code. It'll take you to all of the social media links. And by the way, Cosmic Portals, my space ambient music channel, a new album was dropped like a week ago. Go check it out. If you need help falling asleep, relaxing, or using your imagination to wander the universe, Cosmic Portals is going to be your friend. You can also find that link in the description box below. Get used to the description box. There's a lot in there and it's all useful information. Okay, so get familiar with it. I will see you tomorrow. Be safe and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.